Hello, and welcome to Punk Scholars Network podcast. In this new series called Punkaholics, we're grateful enough to have the ability to sit down with intellectual punk scholars and see what they think about punk. Whether it's artists, researchers, or simply people who just appreciate punk. Our first episode, we're going to talk to Craig Shay. He's a man of many talents. He discusses his love for punk and his thoughts of punk being mainstream, while diving into his experiences in being in a band, whether it's creating songs, traveling and touring, or just being a part of band culture.
Craig tells us about how Cold Rex got started. He also reveals who is the mastermind behind all the hilarious, relatable memes they post on their social media accounts. Craig explains how being in a band is easier in a way than being a solo artist, as you have more people to bounce ideas off of, while having others around you to lean on, lift you up, and push you towards the finish line. Craig's life outside the punk subculture. He mentioned how he got a degree in finance, knowing a steady income is a necessity. When you're just playing gigs on the road, you need a steady income. The realities of touring with friends and an old van are always a great story. He tells us about some funny memories they experienced while they were touring across the country. Craig also tells us about his time playing at festivals like Poozza Fest in Canada and Fest in Gainesville, Florida.
Stay tuned, kick back, and grab a snack, and enjoy Craig's personal stories on punk and gain some insight of the subculture from someone who experienced it firsthand. If you're interested in punk, you might discover what drove other people to become a part of this subculture.
Thanks for listening and enjoy Craig's crazy stories and good time that we had on this podcast. Stay tuned for our evaluation of the podcast at the end, where we discuss what happened in the episode.
All right, so I'm just going to kick off with the first question here, but everybody's going to kind of jump in the process to ask a couple other questions. But if you wanted to just introduce yourself, the name of your band, give us some background information on all that.
Yeah, hey, my name is Craig Shay. I play in two bands. One band is called Cold Rex. One band is called Answering Machine. They both play in the same scene and play the same festivals and shows and stuff, but they're kind of different bands, which is neat. I also do solo stuff, which is exhausting. Sometimes I think people think, oh, my band's holding me back. I want to go solo. But if you're solo, you just do all of the work and have no fun. So doing a bit of that, though, just because sometimes people are busy and I still want to be able to play stuff if other people are busy. Yeah, I think I got my first bass guitar when I was 16, and I still play in a band with my high school best friend. We've been in a few bands together, and most of them are terrible. I like to think Cold Rex is decent. Some people like us. Yeah, but I'm based in New York. I lived in the city for a long time. I've lived in Brooklyn and Queens. During the pandemic, my wife and I got a house just north of the city, so it's like a quick drive in. I still play in Brooklyn all the time. That's primarily like where I book. I'm actually playing my first show in Westchester County later this month, which is exciting. There's a few folks who have kind of like moved north, and yeah, so that's a little bit about. Oh, I also play the Fest in Gainesville, Florida, which is how I know Ellen. And I play Poozza Fest in Montreal, which is kind of like if Fest was in Montreal, which is great because Gainesville, Florida is like a college town. There's not a ton to do outside of the festival, but Montreal is like this really cool, beautiful city. So during the day, you hang out in Montreal, and then at night you do music festival stuff. I've done a bit of touring also around the United States and also Canada. I have not played outside of the US and Canada. It's a bucket list thing for me. I was supposed to play a festival in Germany in June 2020, but that did not happen. So that's something I'm trying to do. So yeah, it's a little bit about me.
Cool. So I had introduced them to your band Cold Rex, and so one of our first questions here is about the origins of that band and how you all met. It sounds like there's some overlap with your other band and just the creative process. So what was that like?
Yeah, so Cold Rex started in 2016. Everyone who, like the four members of Cold Rex, were in another band before Cold Rex together. I was in a ska band for a long time with an awful name. It was Eli Whitney and the Sound Machine, and we formed in like 2009 on Long Island. We were all like living on Long Island at the time, going to college and all that, playing a lot of shows at bowling alleys. But we kind of like, I think it's good to, I'm glad I started in like that genre because I think the music could be a little difficult and like very open. And I think we just like worked hard for a long time and didn't really quite get anywhere, but I think that was good. Like, I think we learned a lot. And yeah, so by the end of that band, we weren't really writing ska music anymore or like ska punk really. We were kind of writing the music that Cold Rex was writing. So we're like, all right, let's kind of restart. Let's get a new name that's not terrible, and like let's kind of like leave the ska genre, which I love but is a little specific, and if you play in that genre you tend to get pigeonholed. Sometimes it's hard to get onto other shows or tours or things like that. Some people told us not to do the name change. We didn't listen to them, and we were right because we did way better as Cold Rex. But I think there's like a good amount of bands where if you like look into the musicians' histories, like they've been in a lot of bands and they've toured a lot and they've learned a lot. So like a lot of the best new bands I think are bringing in all of these lessons they've learned the hard way from their old bands.
Cool. Thank you. All right. So why don't we move on with some of our questions here? So Courtney's got the first one.
Okay, so I guess the first question is, what were you doing before you started the band or the bands that you've played in so far?
Yeah, I mean, music's never been my day job. So I've like always kind of, I mean, I guess when I was in middle school, I played viola in the orchestra. So maybe that's how I kind of got into string instruments in general. Um, Before I started a band, like I mean, I listened to like mainstream pop punk. I'm 34, so when I was in middle school and high school, pop punk was big. I feel like there's like a bit of a resurgence in that now, which is kind of neat to see. Except I think that resurgence is just Travis Barker playing on everyone's tracks, but whatever. But yeah, that music was really popular. There was like a bit of a ska and punk scene on Long Island. I was going to shows. There was a band called the Homecoming Queens that I like loved, and I'd go to their shows a lot. And I was like, they're kind of the same age as me. Like, there's really like, why can they do this and I can't? So yeah, I rounded up when I was 16 the weirdest people in my high school, including my best friend, who was not my best friend yet, and we started a band, and we were terrible. But I think you have to be bad most of the time. I think it's good. Failure is good. People don't talk about that. Like if you just always are successful, like you don't build character or learn stuff. I've like any good musician, ask any musician what their first ever tour was like, and it's just a story. It's just a string of colossal failures. So yeah, I don't know. I guess I was going to shows and I was just interested. And I mean, for me also, like I think I really needed like an emotional outlet. I remember when I was 18 and I started singing and playing guitar. It just like I felt better when I played music every day versus days when I didn't play music. So yeah, I think I just needed that outlet too. And I kind of like I remember putting together when I was 18, like if I took my feelings and put those into songs, people liked those songs more than if I just tried to write like whatever.
It's funny that you bring up. No, go ahead, Courtney.
Oh, I was going to just say, and then next question is, was there anyone in your life that disapproved of you starting the band?
I don't know, disapprove, but like my parents didn't really get it. Like they don't play music. They're not musical people. They like music. But I remember like when I wanted to try singing, my dad was like, you don't do that. So that was kind of weird. And then my parents are funny. Like I'd be like, all right, I'm gonna go play a show. Like I have a show booked. It's been booked for months, and they're like, well, it's raining outside. I'm like, I know it's raining. Like I like booked a show. The show is not outside. The show is inside. So I think it'll be okay. But just stuff like that is so like they kind of didn't get it. I think my 25th birthday, I played a show and they came out and a bunch of like we drew a crowd and people were into it, and that was the first time my parents kind of like got it a bit. They're like, oh, people like this and this is cool. But yeah, they definitely like the touring and all of that. Like did not understand it all. Had no frame of reference. Like they want to be supportive, but it just seems like very unsafe and it's also very expensive. I'm telling my parents I'm going to buy a 1998 Ford Econoline conversion van for $2,000 from this dude who I think is an alcoholic, and we're going to get it tuned up and we're going to hit the road and drive around to Florida and back for the next 2 weeks. It just like doesn't really make sense to them. Like they don't do stuff like that.
I have the next question, which is, what were some of the challenges of being in a band?
The worst thing that no one talks about, if you really get to a certain level, is owning a van, like a touring vehicle. It's really expensive. I have some friends who are talking a little bit about it now, but you probably have seen, or maybe you've seen like GoFundMe's where people are like, our van blew up on tour. So the way most bands tour with a van is you buy a van, probably an old one, because a new van is like $50,000. That's a lot of money. I don't have $50,000 lying around. So most bands will buy an older van from like the 90s or early 2000s. And when you put that much weight in a van, or if you have a trailer that you're pulling, like the van, like it's hard on the transmission. Like there's no van that's really meant for that, especially an older one. So it's kind of a matter of time. So if you have a van that you own, you're probably spending at least $5,000 a year to keep it going, even if you're not touring that much. So that's a huge problem right there. It's just, yeah, that's a challenge. There's a lot of challenges. Being on tour also is like, before my first tour, I saw this band I really liked called Dead to Me. And they were doing this tour with this other band Against Me, and I found the singer.
They're awesome. I'm just jumping to say that.
I found the singer from Dead to Me, and I was like, hey, I got my first tour coming up. Like, what? Do you have any advice? I was asking a lot of people that. And he said, don't have any expectations. And that was like the best advice. Because I thought that like every show of tour was going to be like the best ever home show. And it's not that way, because you're a no-name band in a place you've never been and don't know anybody. So it's kind of terrible. Even bigger bands you might think are bigger, like in New York City or like LA or Philly, like bands have like, there's a lot of music fans, so like, bands do well there. But some bands who might play a huge like venue in New York City might go to Louisiana and play like a 40 capacity venue because there just aren't as many music fans in that place, at least not for that band. So that's a challenge. A lot of things are easier now. I feel like perpetual challenges are just being organized, making sure things get done, not being too lazy. It's really easy to like, there's so many little things, right? So like I wanted to record and release a solo album a few years ago, and I was like, well, I'll record it with my friend. And then the pandemic started and I couldn't like spend time with them anymore. So I was like, well, I'll just record it myself. And then I just couldn't find the motivation. It's like, I'll do it acoustic. And then, I mean, to get something recorded, I kind of like needed to reach out to a producer friend and say like, can you record me? And we talked it out, but I find that I really need like another person motivating me to get things done. But you have to get someone that you know and trust and make them motivate you. And then that's kind of how I can get things done. But there's like a lot of little things, like all the little schoolwork stuff that you might think is like annoying, like that all translates. Like there's a lot of, something like having a schedule. If you're releasing a single, for example, like you probably want to have like eight weeks of promotion planned out. And that seems boring, but like for me, I need to have like a Google reminder, like, okay, the first Monday, post about it on social media. The second Monday, post a video on TikTok where I say what the song is about. The third Monday, release a lyric video that I had to pay someone on Fiverr to make for me because I don't know how to do that. You can get them cheap, so it's fine. The fifth week, maybe I'm posting like a playthrough. Here's how you play the song on guitar or whatever. So just like being organized and making sure you do all the little things you need to do. Having a plan first helps a lot, but it really is hard to not lose motivation. So that was a lot of stuff that's hard about music.
There's a lot of insight in there. If you've never been on tour, if you've never played in a band, I mean, it looks like it's a lot of fun all the time. And it sounds like there are challenges, obviously. So
there's this one like stretch of road. It's like, I think it's in the Midwest, and it's like it's very mountainous and it's just hard on a vehicle. And like a lot of vans break down there, and a lot of bands break up on that one stretch of road because your van breaks and you have no money and you're probably in the middle of a tour that's doing kind of and you have to make a decision.
That makes sense. All right, so why don't we keep going? We have some more questions here.
How you doing today? My question is, how was it like going on tour? Did you experience any crazy moments or any fan interaction?
Yeah, so if you're a smaller band, it's probably not a ton of fan interaction. Something that's nice about continuing to tour and revisit the same places is you do start to like you make friends there. So like the first time I played Morgantown, West Virginia, we just had a terrible dramatic incident where a band member had to go home. There was some mental health stuff we didn't understand, and it was like totally crazy, and everything's cool now. But we were in like a terrible mood, and we get to Morgantown, West Virginia. We don't know anybody. But luckily we were like on a show that had like a lot of bands that were friends, and we made friends with them. We're still friends with those people today. So yeah, you get lucky when you play shows where there's like a lot of people. But even on like the last tour I went on, we played. I think it was. I don't know if it was Idaho or Iowa for the first time. No, Indiana. It was someplace in Indiana. I think we never played before. And I was in like a terrible mood. Like we didn't know the bands. We weren't getting along with the other bands. Like no one there really, like no one was mean to us, but no one got into us. I was just like feeling very insecure, and I've been doing it for a long time at that point. But it's still, when you play a new place and no one knows you, it could really be like a big kind of blow to your ego, or it makes you uncomfortable. I think a lot like touring is not about playing music in a lot of ways. Touring is about driving, and it's about not fighting with your bandmates because you're together all the time and you're under a lot of stress. I think touring is about trying to find like a little bit of your own stability. Like you're in different places all the time. Like what can make you comfortable? But yeah, my first ever tour when I was the only one who was 21 on the whole tour, so I got all the bar tabs, which was kind of nice. But yeah, I think we had like we went on tour with another band. They booked a lot of it. They did a terrible job. We had a lot of days off, so it was like my first ever tour. There was a show. It was the first time I played Gainesville, Florida, where we literally played to one person. Like one person heard there was a show, drove out. Like you're not going to make money on that show, obviously. So it was good. It was good because I learned how to play at my best, even if no one is there or no one cares. So even in the failure, you could take the lessons. And then the other thing, like there's a band I really like called the Lawrence Arms, and they're reasonably successful now. But I was listening, like their singer's doing like he's done a bunch of podcasts where he's revisited a lot, and up until very recently, their story was basically a story of failure. Like they never had any mainstream success. Like they had this weird kind of fandom, which is cool. And I do like their band, but yeah, they're like deeply weird. They're like not for most people. And it's just funny that like they have all this like cred, but all like the cred is just like failing a lot in your teens and 20s and then kind of turning that into something in your 30s and 40s. Sorry, I know my answers are rambling a lot. If you feel like I'm not getting to the point, you could actually ask you this and I can revisit it.
No, that was good. I think Brendan Kelly's he's doing a tour, I think, right? He's with they're coming around. Not the Lawrence Arms, but Brendan Kelly, I think, is doing some stuff nearby.
Maybe. He's always
around here. Yeah. Cool. All right. Let's see here.
I had a question. So you mentioned festivals that you played. What was your favorite, I guess, and what was it like playing Pooza Fest? I know you're playing that coming up. Did you like Fest better? Like I know you mentioned the Montreal Festival. What was it like kind of playing each venue? Did you like one in particular?
Yeah, playing festivals is great. I think we got a lot of legitimacy that way. Once you get on a festival, like, oh, you're a band that plays fest. There's this like kind of little network you're a part of. If you're on a tour to one of the festivals and you tell the venue, I'm touring to this festival, I think you're more likely to get booked. I think we got a lot of legitimacy by getting on Fest in Gainesville. So I love Fest. Fest and Pooza are similar. Like they have very similar vibes, similar bands. They're just in different locations, which give them different vibes. I guess Fest would be my forever favorite. But we got on Pooza before we got on Fest, and I think getting on Pooza gave us some legitimacy to get on. I would say we're playing this festival. Maybe you want us for that festival. As far as playing them, I've played all the stages. So Fest is in Gainesville, Florida, and I've like the secret best slot is the first slot. It's Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So Friday, the first band is usually like 3 or 4 p.m. at this small bar that I don't think is there anymore called Mother's Pub. I don't know if it's still around, but basically playing on the floor. No one at the door is checking the capacity. But you're not really competing with anybody. So like a lot of these festivals, there's like, Fest and Pooza, they have like 10 different stages. And there's like bands every 30 minutes. It's like a set. So you make a schedule and you try your best, but like, you can have to promote to get people to come to you or get people excited about you. So like playing that first slot on a floor is secretly the best spot because everyone just comes out. If they want to see a band, you're the only band they could see, even though it's like small. So that's really cool. I always like that. I've also played like the main stage at Fest. Technically, it was the night before, and we were doing a cover set with my band Answering Machine. Very different experience. That was like way hotter. Like I had to take my glasses off because they kept sliding off my face because I was so sweaty. And then like sound in a big space on stage is different than sound in a small space. Similar with Pooza, I've played like a lot of the smaller bars versus like the main stage. I always prefer like the smaller, more intimate settings, and that's actually a problem at Fest. Where I know there was one year this band Direct Hit, they were getting a little too big for the smaller venues, but they wanted to still play them because it's a more intimate, cool show experience. And so they had a smaller venue, and then it was way too packed, and people were getting way too excited. And this woman I know like broke her knee. So you have to be a little careful. As a band gets bigger, they can't always play a smaller venue because it gets a little dangerous for everybody.
I had a question. Is their goal to merge to mainstream or?
The pandemic kind of really affirmed my decision to. I have a day job. I've always had day jobs. I work in like the financial technology startup space. I have an economics degree. I don't like. I've never really toured all the time. I've never really toured more than like a month out of the year cumulatively. And like I remember I was like 24 and I was like temping a lot and like I was touring a bit and I just like was lacking all stability in my life. I was like I just got out of a big relationship. I was kind of aimless, and then I got like my first like job in the industry. It was like a temp job, and they hired me, and it was really cool. It was the first time I worked at a startup. I like working at startups because they give you like a little more space to be like an individual, a little more creativity. They also give you time off to tour, which is nice. So I remember thinking like I'm really glad I have this stability. And I have friends who are in bigger bands. Like I'm friends with this band Spanish Love Songs. They're touring all the time. I'm friends with some people who play in Jeff Rosenstock's band. He's one of my favorites. And when the pandemic hit, I got to start working from home, and I never really had to stop working, and that was really nice to have that stability. And Spanish Love Songs, they tried to transition to being an online band where they had created a Patreon, and they were releasing like they were coming up with cool like B-sides and alternative versions of their songs, and they let their fans vote on like different covers that they would do, and that was cool. But like I think I'm pretty sure they like hated doing that. Like it's not as fun because I saw them February 2020. They got us in. We were doing a weekend tour, and they were touring with the Wonder Years, so they got us into a Wonder Years show for free in Boston. And I got to see them in this huge venue touring for this big band, getting new fans. They just put out an album. Everyone's getting really into it. And then everything shuts down and they have to switch to being an online band. And it's just so different. Like now that shows have kind of come back, there's such a magic to shows. Like I went to a show like 15 minutes from my house on a Monday a few weeks ago. And I like made friends with this touring band from Tennessee, and they wound up crashing at my house. And like there's just such a magic to things like that. I mean, I'm not against like online stuff. Like social media is important. You can really gain a presence, but like there's a phenomenon I've seen where, I don't know. I remember like maybe this is like 10, 15 years ago. Perez Hilton, right? He just he's the TMZ person. He tried to do like a tour. Like he brought like a bunch of like cool artists too. Like I remember Ida Maria from I think Norway or Sweden was one of them, and the tour was a disaster because even though he had this huge reach and presence, like just because you have that, just because someone will watch your stuff or read your stuff doesn't necessarily mean they'll like, come out to something. So sometimes you see like it's hard to or there's this band Hoity Toity from I think they're in LA. They have like a huge online presence because their lead guitar player is really really good, and she posts these guitar playthroughs on Instagram, and like they get a lot of engagement, and then they don't know how to make that into like fans for their band. Like people don't know that the guitar person is also in a band. But yeah, your question is like, do I ever want to go mainstream? And I think like I had one song get huge on Spotify, which is cool, but I'm really just happy if I could play these two festivals I like, if I could tour on occasion, if I could play local shows with bands I like, and if I could record and like release music, I'm very happy with the way I have it set up. And I know that, doing it full time is kind of hard.
Hey, I think Joe's got a question.
Yeah. So you mentioned before some bands you listened to before starting your own. Were there any bands, it can be mainstream or maybe underground, that really inspired any of your bands?
Yeah, I think the bands that have inspired me most have been bands that I've just kind of seen around. Like when I was in high school, there's that band, the Homecoming Queens, I mentioned. Like their trombone player is like a famous trombone player now. Like he plays with Taylor Swift and like the Roots and Elvis Costello and stuff. It's really, he was always a little bit better than everybody. It's cool that he had like mainstream success. Or the guitar player, this guy John Graber, he produces this ska band, We Are the Union, that does well. But the cool thing about like local acts is like you could interact with them. So it just, you feel it more deeply. And like John Graber from the Homecoming Queens like produced he was the first producer I ever worked with my ska band, and like that was really helpful and eye opening to us, like how to be a band, like how to write songs like it'll sound good recorded. When I was in college, like I went to New Paltz in New York. There was this band, the Nelson Villains, and like they put out this album, and they did a lot of touring and stuff. They never really got big or anything, but like the songwriting was like super good. And kind of like inspired me thematically. Like the singer like wrote, I feel like he had this theme of being afraid of himself, and I had never really considered that as like a songwriting topic before. So I think like any of the songs I wrote in like 2013 and 2014 have that theme because I saw it live and I thought it was cool. And so I feel like I've been more influenced by bands around me. Then also when you see what other people are doing, you can talk to them. Like people ask me, how do I get on Fest? What do I do? And I could tell you, like, here's what I did. It took me 5 years to get on the festival. So, you want to be patient. And like, here's who you reach out to, and here's what you should say. So I find that like kind of smaller net to be more inspirational and more influential. I like good bands too. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if you Oliver Tree. He's like pretty big on like social media and TikTok, and he makes these really cool music videos. It's funny. I feel like his music is just pop punk music, but it's not really how he sells it.
I have a question about like your process of like writing an album together. Like how would you describe that?
Yeah, so for Cold Rex, we have two principal songwriters. So it's me and it's my best friend, Mike Busy. And we each kind of write on our own. And then we get to we'll bring it to the band. So we'll demo. And then usually like me or Busy will learn the song before practice. And then the other people don't learn the song before practice, which is a little annoying, but that's how it is. And then we'll kind of ideally what you do is you come up with at least like a simple way to play it, and then you just keep playing it like a million times, and you have ideas and you just share them. Our drummer, he has like the best ideas. He'll be like, what if we play the rhythm differently? What if we make this chorus longer? What if we do like a quiet chorus now and then a loud chorus at the end, give it a little more impact. So that's generally how Cold Rex writes. I also do solo stuff, like for my solo EP that I played drums on. I had to figure out how to like write drum parts for myself. So I just like demoed everything, and I would like just keep re-recording the drums to try to come up with more interesting ideas. But my preferred method is you have a band, you have a regular practice time once or twice a week. You learn a song and you just keep playing them over and over again until you kind of work out like what's good, what's not, what has to change. Demoing is huge though, like recording before you go into the studio, because you don't know how something's going to sound recorded. You might know how it feels live, or it sounds a certain way in your head, and then you record it and you're like, you know what, that part doesn't work. That bass part's terrible. I need to change it. So recording is really big before you go into a studio.
All right. Guilty eyes. In my reflection, I'm falling from the sky.
We have just a couple more questions. I know we're getting close to 2:00, so we have.
I can go over on time. I don't know if you guys can.
Okay, all right. Then we just have like 2 or 3 more questions.
Sure.
For your album, this could be okay. What is the background story of getting the cover photo? The artwork for the album cover.
Yeah, that actually has a little bit of a story, so I'm glad you asked that. So the band had this idea that I thought was terrible, but we vote in our band. So that's a good way to do it. There's 4 of us though, so sometimes there's an impasse. But so we vote. I got outvoted, and the idea was it's a guy and he's sitting on the subway. And his life is falling apart. And you can tell because he has a bunch of moving boxes and he's holding them. So clearly he just got kicked out of some place and he's on like a subway car. I'm like, okay, not my favorite idea, but whatever. I could work with that. And then like, well, the boxes should be blocking his face. And I'm like, well, that's terrible because like people like to see faces. That's not new information. So there's this artist, Michaela, what's her last name? Is it Palmero? She does art for like a lot of big bands, but you could still work with her. She's really talented. She's worked with like Jimmy World and Dashboard Confessional. She's done some cool stuff. But she'll work with smaller bands too. So we pitched her this idea. She gave us a sketch. We just didn't like it. We still paid her for the sketch. I'm a big fan of, like, you got to pay artists, unless you're like really good friends or something. Like, expect to pay something for any work done. So we scrapped that idea. Still paid her for it. And then we had my idea. I was just spitting out. I can come up with a lot of ideas. Not all good, but I can do that, which is great for stuff like Twitter. Around the time we were working on that album in Central Park, there was this Mandarin duck that just like showed up. So a duck that primarily lives in China just shows up in New York. That's weird. So this is probably someone's exotic pet that they released. But this duck, he like got along with all the other ducks, and he like made a lot of people happy. And like but he didn't know he's just a duck, right? Like, he's a duck, but people would come to see him. And I like the theme of like, well, what if like you really make a lot of people happy and you don't even know? What if there's some difference about you that you're just not even aware of? Like, this duck has no idea that he's a special duck or that he shouldn't be there. And like, what if that brings a lot of joy to people? So we got some reference photos and we sent it off to the artist, and she drew it up and she added some cool stuff there. But yeah, it's based off of the Mandarin duck that showed up and then eventually disappeared in Central Park.
I have one more question. What's something about the band that a lot of people don't know?
That's a great question. Something about the band that a lot of people reach out to me about band stuff, but like I'm not like, usually Vizzy does all the management stuff. I do more of it sometimes. He is a kid now, so he's a little busy. But yeah, I think a lot of times people like look at someone as the face of the band, and then in reality, there's like someone else is like, I think people think the singer does a lot of the stuff, but it's sometimes like the bass player or the drummer does a lot of the back end work. So I would say that there's probably a lot of people do know about us, because like we're just very outward. Like, we're huge dorks. We're not cool. We all have office jobs. So I think that's all obvious kind of stuff. I think people do still think we have a van though, and we don't. My wife will not let me buy another van. She was like, this is the worst part of your life. It stresses you out so much. And if you tour, you could just rent a van, or we all have cars now. We could just like, we could figure stuff out. So yeah, I think the biggest misperception now is people think we have a van and we don't. And actually, when our van died, it was going up to Montreal, and I had a feeling it was going to die, but no one listened to me. And I did a photo shoot, like death of the van photo shoot, where I have a bunch of photos, and it's just me, and we're like taking the license plate off, and we're cleaning out all the stuff.
It seems like a rite of passage, though, that like, you had to have that kind of story in order to successfully be a band.
Yes, you need a lot of. It's better to have a lot of failure. Even like, everyone knows the band Weezer. But if you dig into their story, like they were like, a bunch of them were in like a hair metal band together. Like, no one talks about this, and it's like you can find the music and it's like very different, but like they learned how to be a band by like failing as like prog and hair metal bands for a long time before they kind of discovered the Weezer sound. So like or the band Pup, they were in a band called Topanga before that, which is basically the same songs, but you can kind of see the growth of like how like they learned how to be a band. And then they became Pup, and it's like, where did this band Pup come from? And it's like, they have been doing this for 10 years. Like, it didn't just come out of nowhere.
I had a quick question. We were looking through your Instagram and we noticed a lot of memes. So we were curious to see who is the meme king behind all of that.
We actually do have a lot of meme talent in our band. So I just use like a meme app, like a meme, I don't know, it's called like, I think it's just called Meme Generator for Android. Sorry, I have an Android phone. And I'll just kind of do quick, stupid, whatever's popular memes. People like visual stuff, so any kind of visual content you can make easily is good. But for the truly weird stuff, that's Vizzy. He learned Photoshop when he was like 25, and he was just he's very creative and he's very smart. So, and then Matan, our lead guitar player, makes memes sometimes, but it's mostly me and Vizzy. Anything it's really kind of crazy and weird is probably Vizzy, and everything that's a little more straightforward meme is probably me. Also, people don't like memes as much as they used to, so it's not even like as much of a thing that you could really do anymore. Any little trend, like if it seems like it's a little hot, just do it, and then because it's not going to be hot in like a couple weeks or months. like memes in general, like Twitter. We got like a huge Twitter following, and that doesn't matter anymore. Like no one's on Twitter, and Twitter's dying. TikTok, I just can't. I post sometimes, but it's so draining. It's so much effort. I'll spend 3 hours making a 30-second video that no one even watches. I don't have that in me. Like I'll post on it sometimes just to exist on it, but TikTok's gonna die and something else is gonna come out. So yeah, there's always something new.
Right.
So for my last question, are there any future projects that either you or one of your bands have coming up?
Coldrex is really trying to record and release an EP this year. We have a new practice space in Brooklyn, and we got really good at practicing at the beginning of the year. But it's just hard. I live a little north of the city now. It's just hard to get everyone together. Busy as a baby. It takes up a lot of his time. The older you get, everything gets harder and harder and harder. As much as something might seem hard to you right now, like I remember my first tour. I'm like, should I be doing this? Maybe it's not the right time. And that was the easiest it's ever been for me to tour. Like it only ever gets harder. And I was 23. I'm like, this seems kind of crazy. 24, 20. Like now I'm 34, and it's like if I can do a weekend tour, that's like a miracle. So just any opportunity, if you really want to do something, just do it, because it's only going to get harder. And I'm not saying you're going to get less opportunities as time goes on, but everything only ever gets harder. Coldrex wants to do an EP. Solo stuff, I'm releasing an EP in May. And I'll always do solo stuff, but it's not my ambition. I just want to do solo stuff so I could like play a show every once. Like if I play solo, people know what I sound like. And my band Answering Machine, I don't know, everyone like really, the guitar player singer moved up to Kingston, New York, which is like 3 hours away from the city. So we still do stuff, but we haven't really done anything like new and creative. We released an album April 2020 or May 2020, which is the worst time to release music because we had all this vinyl we couldn't sell. We couldn't play shows. We tried to do online stuff, but this Sammy, who's one of the singers in Answering Machine, and Lewis, who's in that band, they started a new band called Sadlands that's really good, and they play all these Brooklyn local shows now because everyone in that band still lives in Brooklyn. And then JD, the guitar player in Kingston, he started a new solo project that I'm playing bass in. So we're all kind of doing stuff, but I don't know the next time we'll be able to like record and do something. So yeah, those are kind of my loose plans, but I'll always play music. I'll always try to have fun with it. I'll always try to do the things I want to do. I won't say no to things that I want to do. And I don't know. I feel like you got to be open and age gracefully, and be open-minded, but don't be stupid. Like I think if I did, like I shouldn't be closed-minded to making stuff for TikTok, but I don't need to do TikTok dances. No one wants that from me.
I think it would make for some very interesting content. There needs to be more of an overlap of like TikTok dances and punk music. I think he could maybe be the person to do it.
I feel like drummers do really well on TikTok. There's a lot of really cool. There's one guy, he just does like weird joke covers, and he hasn't heard before, and he just like, laughs while he plays the drums, and that's the whole account, and I love it. So I don't know. It's like a weird niche.
Whatever is entertaining, I guess.
There's that guy Alex Melton, and he mostly does like, what if this song was written by Blink-182, and that's like most of what he does, and I hate it so much. He seems like a nice guy, but I really like it is not funny to me. It's like the same joke over and over again, and he just keeps doing it. People keep engaging, and I'm like, okay, I get it.
Yeah, it's a weird, interesting space that I think we're not sure what to do with it yet, but it'll be interesting to see what happens.
We got to figure it out, because I have a sense that I feel like we're gonna have something new in like another year or two. So
yeah, definitely. With Twitter going away or dying or whatever it's doing, I think we're gonna have some.
I hope it's text based, because I am old.
Yeah. I'm right there with you. So yeah, any last thoughts? Anything else that we didn't cover? Anything else that you wanted to share?
Yeah, make silly merch whenever you get the opportunity. Like I like beer koozies. They're really cheap to make, but like this like go to like cafepress.com or whatever and just see what they have. You can get like sunglasses with bottle openers on the end. Like those are not that expensive. Those are cool. Any like stickers are super cheap. Sticker Mule does really good high quality stickers. Yeah, just like pay artists to come up with logos. Like I had an artist friend make a bunch of logos for me, and now I need to come up with a bunch of merch quickly, and I'm so glad I have all that done. So yeah, don't be afraid to pay artists to, and then like it curates like a vibe. Like if people associate a few visuals with you, like I think that kind of solidifies like how they identify with you, and that could be cool. And I guess my last advice is just authentically always be yourself. Do what you want to do. Maybe you want to be in a weird performance art band and that's who you are. Do that. That's great. But like, don't do something you hate, because you're going to make bad art. No one's going to like it and you're going to be mad at yourself.
That's great advice. Very good. Well, thank you so much for talking to us. And, we're going to have some good times putting some visual audio stuff together and making this podcast. So I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us. And yeah, I'll probably see you at a show sometime soon. So that'll be.
Hopefully. All right, bye, everybody. Good to meet you.
Thank you.
We hope you all enjoyed that informative, funny, and relatable conversation with Craig Shay. He truly stripped down the assumptions of touring in the punk community. He took all the glitz and glam of touring and threw it out the window. Being a performer in the punk subculture is a whole other beast. A lot of people depend on you to be the best and meet their standards of what a punk band should be. However, that isn't always the reality.
No one talks about what happens on tour. You never know, one day could be born, or the other day something crazy could happen. For example, when he said during tour in New York he saw an exotic duck as someone's pet, and how it fits in with all the other ducks playing around. He made a connection through seeing it through the eyes of a lens of what if you make a lot of people happy and you don't even know. These experiences with people can help you grow and see the world in a different point of view.
Touring and going to new cities is difficult when you're an underground no-name band, which does have its negatives. On the other hand, being a smaller band has its positives, which include performing at intimate venues, which is something you can't get when you're a mainstream band like Blink-182, Fall Out Boy, or Panic at the Disco. That one stretch of road that Craig mentioned a lot of bands break up on, or down, was interesting to learn, because the realities of an old van pulling that much weight across thousands of miles is something many people don't think of. I guess Cold Rex survived that stretch of road since they're still together.
People believe that the face of the band is the singer and that they do all the work, when in reality it could be the bass drummer or the bass player. Sometimes your work can go unnoticed when you pursue something you love, but in this case, don't get discouraged because it could pay off someday. Being in a band is like a team where everyone gets the credit and everyone contributes.
But during the pandemic, Craig started working on solo material, but as he mentioned, it was difficult to get all the logistics done, like scheduling certain posts on social media for specific days to ensure his work gets done and enough exposure. Once all of that schoolwork, he said, was done and out of the way, he was able to have fun writing and recording. Thank you for listening, and enjoy the next episode of Punkaholics.